Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to do a quick review and side-by-side comparison of the new Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Concealer next to the Huda Beauty Faux Filter Concealer. These are both concealers I have heard rave reviews about this year, so I was really excited to pick up some samples of both, and I'll be doing a full wear test of these side by side. So if you're curious to learn more about either of these concealers, then just stick around. So let's first talk about this new Charlotte Tilbury concealer. I got this in shade 4 Fair as part of a recent Sephora order. So I'm anticipating this will be a bit too light for me. I did swatch a couple shades in store. I'll put the picture here. I swatched shades 5 and 7.5, and 5 was definitely a little bit light, 7.5 was a little deep. So I think 6 is actually my perfect shade, which makes sense. That's the shade in the Beautiful Skin Foundation that I would use, but we'll see how this goes. They did not have shade 6 in this mini size, so let's just swatch shade 4. Oh, okay, it's a decent size applicator. All right, so yeah, a little light, but I think I can use this as a brightening concealer. So this does come out pretty thick to start, so let me blend it out a little bit. I think this will give really good coverage just based on how it swatches. And I have been very curious about this concealer because I have so many Charlotte Tilbury products. I frequently do full faces of Charlotte Tilbury, but the one product that I don't have from her is a concealer, since her previous concealer had pretty bad reviews on the whole. And so far it seems like this one is getting better reviews. What I've heard overall is that it's a very luminous concealer, so maybe not the most flattering on under eye texture or lines, but it does look really beautiful on camera, at least based on the video reviews I've seen so far. So I'm really excited to try this out all over my face today. For the faux filter from Huda Beauty, I have this sample, and I think I will probably use primarily the light shade, but maybe dip into the medium for some spot concealing around the face. So this is supposed to be a luminous matte finish, so I'm guessing it'll probably be a little bit more matte in comparison to the Charlotte, but it does say luminous. And this one's supposed to brighten and correct, be water, sweat, and transfer proof, so we'll see how well this lasts. In terms of the claims for the Charlotte Tilbury one, it says it conceals, corrects, brightens, and lifts the look of skin. It's medium buildable coverage. It doesn't really say anything though about being water resistant, but I have heard that it lasts pretty well on people's skin. So let me just swatch the light version of the Huda concealer. This is shade 2.7 Coconut Flakes. I think this is a similar level of depth to the Charlotte, but definitely more yellow in undertone. So definitely the formula of these two concealers is very different. As you can probably tell, the Huda upon initial application is much more liquidy. It's more of a loose cream, almost feels more like a foundation, whereas the Charlotte is a very thick consistency. So without further ado, let's put these on my face. So first I'm gonna put the Charlotte on the right side of my face. So I'm gonna first just start with this on my under eye area because it's very light, but if I can make it work, I'll try to put this all over my face just so we can really do a very thorough wear test. And I'm just gonna go in with my beauty blender and tap this into the skin. And yeah, as you can see, this is quite bright on my skin tone, but it is blending out pretty easily despite its very thick texture. Alrighty, so there we have a little bit of the Charlotte on this side, nothing on this side. I think you can definitely see that whole brightening effect. In the interest of today's wear test though, I'm going to continue layering some of this all around, and I do have this blemish here, so I'm going to see how well this covers that up. Same over here. And why not? Let's just try to see if I can shear this out all over the skin, make it kind of like a foundation for today. We'll see if this works. But this way we will get a really good sense of how this wears really all over the face. I am expecting this to make me look a little bit like a disco ball, but that's okay. We're primarily looking at the formulation for today. And I'll just bronze things up later so it doesn't look too harsh. Okay, actually it's not bad as all over foundation. I mean, you can definitely tell it's a bit bright. Let me actually cut down the light a bit so you can see a little bit better. Put some on the lid as well. Okay, actually that's not that bad. I think it actually looks pretty nice when sheared out as a foundation. It's sort of that really nice glowy, luminous, dewy skin look. It is settling a little bit into my fine lines under my eyes, but that's to be expected. I have not set it yet. It didn't do a good job of sticking to my blemishes, so let me try layering that on more with a finger. So I'm gonna first tap a couple dots and then just tap that in, because I am curious how well this works, not just as an under eye concealer, but as an all over blemish cover as well. Okay, that's good. I think, yeah, if you tap in with a finger, you can definitely get that full coverage. I mean, I don't know if such a brightening concealer is that flattering on pimples. I do feel like this kind of put a little bit of a spotlight there, but part of that's probably just because this is not my shade. I am impressed though with how well it has covered that up. Alrighty, Charlotte Tilbury, I am quite impressed. So here we have the Charlotte all over the side of my face, and then on this side we don't have anything. So now let's go in with this Huda Beauty concealer. And this is a lot of concealer, by the way, in this little sample. I feel like this is more like a foundation rather than a concealer sample. So again, I am gonna kind of use this as foundation today. So I'm gonna try to shear this out all over the face, but concentrate it more on the center. And so I'm gonna use the butt of the Beauty Blender for this. And this is blending in super easily. The fact that it's a more liquid consistency makes it really kind of feel just like a foundation, but with a little bit more coverage. Using the butt of the Beauty Blender for this part is a little bit suboptimal, but we'll make it work. Go over the lid as well. All right, yeah, a little bit goes a long way with this one. I think I got pretty good coverage basically all over my face just with that small amount. And similar to the other side, I'm going to take a little bit on my finger and just tap that on top of the blemish I have here. That looks decent. You can tell a little bit of a difference between how the Charlotte affected this side versus this one. I would say the Charlotte, because it's a drier consistency, adheres a little bit more to the blemish, but because it's so brightening, does have a little bit of that spotlight effect, whereas the Huda Beauty does take a little bit more building up on top of the blemish because it is very liquid. But unlike the Charlotte, it doesn't really highlight it. But yeah, I am having a hard time actually covering this up. I feel like every time I go in to blend out the edges of this, it does kind of just remove the product. So yeah, I think for spot concealing, I mean, I probably would go in more with my Clé de Peau concealer. That's probably the best for this. I don't think either of these are ideal for concealing blemishes, but in terms of under the eye, I think they both work decently well. This one is also settling into the fine lines, but on the whole, I think they look pretty good upon initial application. So I think having both of these concealers all over the face is making it a lot easier to see some of the formulation differences between the two. This one on the Huda side definitely is overall a little bit more perfected looking, and I think that's because it has a bit more of a matte finish. Whereas on the Charlotte side, because it has a little bit more of that glowiness, you do see a little bit more in terms of some of the texture and imperfections I have on this side of my face. But this side does have a little bit more of that kind of healthy glow that looks a little bit more natural in comparison to this side, which looks a little bit more flat matte. On the whole though, I think they both are looking pretty nice after initial application. So since I am seeing a little bit of creasing under both eyes, I'm going to go in with my Wayne Goss Artist Medium Brush and my Pat McGrath Under Eye Setting Powder to just set the under eye area. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of powder also around my nose, just to do my T-zone a little bit. I'm going to leave most of my face unset because I'm just curious how these concealers perform without any powder, because I don't want the wear test to be too affected by that. But I'm just going to dust a little bit along my T-zone. So now that the product has had a little bit of time to set on both sides of my face, I will say that the Huda side is emphasizing my pores a little bit when I look really close up. So I don't know if the camera will be able to pick this up, but if I look at this side of my face over here versus this side of my face, I do feel like I can see the pores a little bit more here in comparison to here. It's a very subtle difference, but I think because the Huda is a little bit more drying, it's a little bit easier to see those pores. Whereas on the Charlotte side, the concealer is a little bit more hydrating, and so I'm not really seeing any of my pores emphasized. Now, in terms of overall coloration, I feel like this side of my face looks a little bit more even and smooth with this concealer in comparison with the beautiful skin. So I think it depends on what your major skin concerns are. If you're primarily worried about your pores being emphasized, then at least upon initial application, the Charlotte looks a lot more flattering. Whereas if you're more interested in kind of overall skin tone evening, then maybe the Huda is a little bit more flattering since it doesn't have that same glowiness to it. So it's been about an hour since I first applied these concealers, so I wanted to give you guys a quick check-in and also show you guys the final look. If you're curious, I have all the products on my face down in the description box below. So first off, I just wanted to show you guys how the swatches are looking. And in case you're curious, I just swatched a ton of blushes for my Gucci blush video. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. But here we have the two swatches that have dried down now. And hopefully you can see that there's quite a significant difference in how these two look. So the Charlotte Tilbury doesn't look like it's fully set because it has a decent amount of hydration and also sheen to it. Whereas for the Huda, even though it is still a little bit wet on that side, on this side where it's fully dried, it does look a lot more matte at this point. Also, the Huda is looking a little bit deeper at this point, whereas the Charlotte is still quite bright. Taking a close look at the skin, I would say when I first applied the concealers, the Huda on the whole was looking more flattering to me. But at this point that everything has settled in, I actually think that the Charlotte is looking a lot better. It has a little bit more of a hydrated effect on the skin, and it's also slightly more blurring. Whereas I feel like with the Huda, areas where I do have pores or texture are now being a little bit more emphasized. Now, I will caveat this by saying that I do have normal to dry leaning skin, and so if you have more oily skin, this might be actually a better effect for you, something that's a little bit more mattified. But at least for me, I think the Charlotte side is currently looking a lot better. Let me know if you guys can see a difference. So here we have the Charlotte side, and then here we have the Huda side. And I'm sorry that the lighting is not completely even on my face, so that might affect how things look on camera. But at least when I'm looking close up with a mirror, that's what I'm seeing. But I'll check in with you guys one more time at the end of the day, so we'll really get to see what the longevity looks like for both of these. So here we are at the end of the day. It's been around 9 hours since I first put these concealers on my face. And today's been overall a pretty chill day for me. I've mostly been indoors, but I did go on 2 walks and have 2 meals. So there was some work that these concealers had to put in. So looking at the 2 of them, I would say they both look pretty good overall. I mean, I'm really impressed how well they've worked all over the face, and I think from any sort of distance, like if you're just even 1 foot away, they both look really nice. Now, if I look super, super close up to my face, I can see some differences between these two. So first off, I would say that the Huda Beauty one has had a bit more staying power underneath my eyes. I do feel like the Beautiful Skin has worn off a little bit in this area. That said, the Huda Beauty looks a little bit more textured and crepey under the eyes. Let me actually bring you guys in so hopefully you can see that yourself. But I feel like especially this area over here on my eyes just looks a little bit unflattering if I'm looking super close up. Whereas on this side, I feel like my under eyes look a little bit more hydrated and I'm not seeing any unflattering texture. Now, in terms of the blemishes, I would say that the Beautiful Skin did not fare that well in covering this blemish. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but it's looking a little crusty over here. In general, I don't think the Beautiful Skin concealer is really meant for covering blemishes. It does have some shimmer in it, and so you really don't want to be highlighting your blemishes so much. It's not terrible. I think in a pinch you can definitely use it for that purpose, but I would for the most part recommend going in with a matte concealer. On the other side with the Huda Beauty, it has mostly worn off from the top of my blemish, so I feel like it didn't really have very good staying power. I think ultimately, since the Huda Beauty is a little bit liquidy, it just doesn't have that staying power that a thicker concealer formula does. So if you're primarily trying to cover blemishes, I would also steer you more towards Clé de Peau and not necessarily towards this one. Elsewhere on the face, I would say if you did want to use a concealer as a foundation, the Huda Beauty looks really nice. I actually like it a lot more in terms of the overall finish it gave to my face rather than specifically under the eye and on blemishes. It basically looks like a really beautiful satin full coverage foundation. The Beautiful Skin definitely gives more of that glowy, natural look to it. I do think, though, that it has a little bit more of a shimmer than I would like for all over application. So you can't really tell this if you're looking at my face from any distance, but under the right lighting conditions close up, you can see that there are some shimmer particles in this concealer. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that, especially all over the face. But if you are looking for that glowy look and you have dry skin, I do think this Beautiful Skin concealer will give you that really nice glow. So on the whole, after today's wear test, I would say that I am impressed with both of these concealers. They both wore really well despite this pretty difficult wear test and application all over the face. That said, I'm not totally blown away by either of them, so I'm not really sure if either of them is really going to kick my Pat McGrath concealer off of its holy grail status. In terms of comparing the two, on the whole, I would say if you have drier skin, I would recommend the Beautiful Skin concealer, especially if you're interested in a bit of a glowy, natural look. Whereas if you have more oily skin or if you want something that looks a little bit more perfected and also is a bit more long lasting, then I would go in with the Huda Beauty concealer instead. I will continue testing out these samples that I have though and let you guys know if my thoughts change over time. So that's it for today's video. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!